In today's lecture, we're looking at the role of power in international relations, the role of power amongst nations on the international stage. As nations interact with other nations, they exhibit power. Power is behind everything nations do. And we need to understand that in international relations, it is a complex game. And even though nations may seem friendly, they go to conferences, to go to summits, they meet at the United Nations, they interact on trade and exchange information. At the end of it is power. Power is what is driving those interactions. So in today's lecture, we're going to be looking at the role of power in international relations. Now, for us to understand this, let's take a look at the key concept of politics, because politics is part of the mix. Politics, as a matter of fact, is at the core of this tussle for power. So here it says, politics, right? It says here, politics entails the pursuit and exercise of power to outwit. Now, this is a key word here, to outwit other states, right? So politics entails the pursuit and exercise of power to outwit other states. Please take note of this point. This is a crucial point, and this captures the entire lesson and lecture of today. So politics entails the pursuit and exercise of power to outwit other states. Now, what does that mean? It means that politics, as we know it, it's all about power. Even at the micro level, it's all about power. How do I outwit my opponent? How do I outsmart my opponent? How do I convince my opponent? How do I ensure that my opponent sees things the way I see them? That's what politics is about, essentially. All right, so politics entails the pursuit and exercise of power to outwit other states. Then it says, in other words, political relations are maintained within the context of power. So when two countries are engaging and interacting, they do so, right, within the context of power. And oftentimes, the one with the most power, and when we talk about power, we are talking about political power. We are talking about economic power, right? And sometimes we're talking about even military power. All of these play a role in terms of how nations view other nations. The United States, for example, is the most powerful country economically. It is number one. The dollar is internationally traded. There's no other currency that is so widely accepted than the dollar. And it has power. And when it interacts with other countries at the global stage, it does so in the position of power. And this is very significant. It goes to the table knowing fully well that it is powerful, it is feared, it is respected, it is revered because it has resources, it has means, and is able to achieve its goal or its national interest. Let's take a look at this again, students. Political relations are maintained within the context of power. Now think about this, right? Every political relation, there is no exception. Every political relation is carried out within the context of power. Now, if somebody says that is not true, well, then really they need to study the research, they need to study international relations, because power is at the center of all relations when we talk about international relations. Even if they're talking about health, even if they're talking about other things like environment, climate change and so forth, they do so within the context of power. And that's why you often see the big countries are the ones that are able to move the needle and impact policies and regulations on the international stage. They are the ones that really are able to sanction others that they feel that have contravened international law. All right, so power relations, right, is key. Let's take note of this, right? So the power we're talking about could be any one of these or all of these: political power, economic power, military power, right? And then it says international relations tells us that the national interest which every nation has national interest, and they seek to protect those national interests with their power. With the power they have, they seek to protect those national interests. They seek to further those national interests. They seek alliance. They seek partnership to further the national interest. Now, let's be aware, in political science, there is a saying that there are no permanent friends but permanent interests. Please take note of this point, students. No permanent friends, but permanent interest. What does that mean? It means that the interest is always there, is central. They have different friends and different partners and allies they use to achieve those national interests at certain points in time. Sometimes an ally may not be useful, so that ally becomes an enemy. And they move on to the next ally that they think can further their national interest. So the friendship is not permanent, but the national interest is permanent. Take note of this point. All right, so it says here then, let's take a look at this once again. International relations tells us that national interest, which every nation has, is achieved by power, right? It's achieved by power. So they exhibit power, they exercise power, they flaunt their power to achieve their national interest. If their national interest is to impose a regime change in a certain country, well, they use their power to get other people to join in on their agenda. They use their power to get other countries to join in on their agenda, and they impose regime change, right? They can promise resources to certain countries, maybe countries that are bordering that country, countries that have influence on the global stage. They can, promise resources, money, loans, or what have you, so that they can support them and, towards achieving their national interest. So this is the reason why most nations want power and hegemony, right? Hegemony is control. Hegemony is control. Hegemony is making sure that you are in charge of affairs as a country. You're in control. It is both an end, right? So power is an end as well as a means, right? You can use power as a means in international relations, international politics, or it can be used as an end, right? As an end, as the end goal. The end goal is power as a means to achieve national interest, right? So if it's an end, well, is the end goal. That's the goal. The goal has been achieved. They use power to achieve the goal. They use power to muscle their way. They use power to get allies. They use power to forge relationships to achieve their goal. That's the end goal. If as a means, if power as a means, well, it is used, right, towards the end goal as well. Power is used towards the end goal when it's used as a means, right? So it is both an end and a means in international relations and politics. Power is so important that it determines how a state is viewed. Now, this is a critical point. When we talk about power in international relations, we are talking about perceptions. Please take note, right? So power, right? Let's put that here. Power equals to perceptions. How you are perceived, perceptions. This is perceptions. How you are perceived by the global community, by other countries. It depends on how much power you have. It doesn't depend on your civilization. It doesn't depend on how beautiful your country is. It doesn't depend on how handsome your leaders are. It depends on the power you have. It depends on the power you have. The power that you possess is so critical. And that's what this is addressing. Power is so important that it determines how a state is viewed in international community. So the United States, China, Russia, the UK, Germany, France, these are all powerful countries militarily, economically, politically. And they are viewed as such because they have that. If you go to other countries, in other continents, they're not viewed as such. They don't have power. Right? So people flock to those countries. When their leaders invite other leaders, they come because they know they have power and they have resources. Right? They summon other leaders to come to their capitals. They rush down there because they have economic power. And they can make life easier for those leaders. They can authorize loans. They can influence policies. They can, they can supply arms. They can do many things to other countries that don't have power. That is what we mean by power is so important that it determines how a state is viewed within the context of the international community. And this is the reason why power is very important. It's a very important concept in international relations. So when we talk about international relations, we are talking about power play. and we're looking at the role power plays in international relations. It's a means to an end. Please take note of this point. Power is a means to an end. So let's put that here. Means, right, to an end. Right? It's a means to an end. So a lot of countries use it to achieve certain goals. And that end is national interest. Right? Often national interest. This is national interest. And again, don't forget the saying that there are no permanent friends but permanent interest in international relations, in political science. And this is a key point. Understanding this point will give you a background, a foundational background, foundational knowledge of the role power plays in international relations. All right, so let's get rid of this and just look at this one more time. Politics entails the pursuit and exercise of power to outwit other states. That's the whole idea of politics. You don't get into politics by being nice. You don't get into politics by being, soft and weak. You get into politics to outwit the other person, to make sure they see things the way you see things, to share your ideology and to share your objectives and your goals. In other words, political relations are maintained within the context of power. Power relations. Every political relation is maintained within the context of power. Country A versus country B is about power. And if country A has more power, well, country A overpowers country B. I am not talking about physically. I'm talking about in terms of resources, in terms of abilities and capacity, etc. International relations tells us that national interest, which every nation has, is achieved by the use of power. And we look at the war in Kuwait and Iraq, how the United States used its power to mobilize countries to fight against Iraq. I'm talking about the 1991 war, to fight against Iraq. What was the national interest there? Oil. What was the national interest there? Partnership and alliance with Kuwait. And those things were important to the United States. Those things were very important to the United States. And that's what we mean by national interest, which every nation has, is achieved by power. This is the reason why most nations want power and hegemony. Control. Hegemony is control. Let's put that here. It is both an end as well as a means of international politics. Power is so important, like we just said, that it determines how a state is viewed within the international community. So please take note of these, students, because this is what it's all about. Your perception by others is dependent on the power that you wield. And that is just the way it is in international relations. And this is why power is a very important concept in the study of international relations. So I hope you understand this key concept, the role of power, when we talk about international relations, within the context of nations, within the context of a community of nations, how nations interact with nations, the intersection of power and politics. The intersection of power, politics, and nations is a critical point to understand when we talk about international relations.